everyone. It's 4 o'clock here in England.
Time for tea. Hi Timberline family and others who are also joining us, and good to have you with us today. I hope that whatever you're doing, which is probably, if you're in Colorado, just sort of getting up and around, enjoying coffee, starting the day. But it's tea time here, and it's nice to have you joining us. Who is the first person on? Charlie. Charlie.
Good morning, Charlie.
You are the first
Cindy.
person. Hi Cindy, good to have you here. Greetings to you. And so what, we should say, make a little announcement about afternoon tea.
Yes. What do you want to say, Jeff?
Well, basically, good morning, Cindy. This will be today.
Oh, and Karen, good morning.
Hello, Karen, nice to see you. This will be our, hello, Dave. This will be our last afternoon tea for a while. We're taking a couple of weeks vacation. We promised to have these through the lockdown period, and we will intermittently do them. We've really enjoyed them, haven't we?
We have. It's been a lot of fun.
Eating cakes on everyone else's behalf.
Indeed. We feel like we have to make a sacrifice, don't we?
We do. So what's the treat for the day?
Well, today we have rock cakes.
Rock cakes. Now, they don't look stunning, do they? But actually,
No.
You baked these earlier, seriously.
I did. They are homemade rock cakes because it's quite a simple recipe, so I could manage that one.
You manage a lot, but they're really good. Now, they were actually cakes that were promoted, and I'm going to pick this one up and show you a little more closely here. There you go.
They were called rock cakes because they have a rough edge and they resemble the look of rocks, apparently.
But they don't taste like rocks.
They don't taste like rocks.
Now, these cakes, these rock cakes, were actually promoted by the British government at a point in history.
Indeed, they were. So,
Indeed.
During the Second World War, here in England, everybody had a ration book. So food and produce was limited. So to make sure everybody had their fair share, the government created this department to help distribute food. And the way that was done, Jeff, was everybody was given a ration book, and they had to register at a shop or a store with their ration book, and if they went and got their weekly rations, the shopkeeper would put a stamp in their ration book.
Now, why don't you tell us what the weekly rations were while I carry on eating, because I'm enjoying my actual role during this today.
You know, I thought about this at the beginning of lockdown. There were certain things we weren't able to get hold of in the stores and shops here, and you know, we found that a little frustrating at times, and perhaps you did too. But
I mean, there was a toilet roll shortage.
I know. Why was that?
Who knows?
I don't understand.
Don't even want to speculate.
Anyways, every adult was allowed to have 4 ounces of bacon or ham, an amount of other meat, mostly 2 chops, and 2 ounces of butter, 2 ounces of cheese, 4 ounces of margarine, 4 ounces of cooking fat, 3 pints of milk, 8 ounces of sugar, 1 pound of preserve every 2 months, so that's jam, marmalade, etc.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, 2 ounces of tea. Now, you know, in Britain, we like our tea. Can you imagine 2 ounces of tea?
We get through that
for
in the
a
morning.
week.
Yeah.
And 1 fresh egg and some dried egg, and 12 ounces of sweets every 4 weeks. Now, sweets here are candy in the States. I'm assuming that's what that is referring to on that list. So, trying to cook every week with a limited amount of produce, I can't imagine was very easy. And so also what the government Ministry of Food department did, they produced adverts on the television or radio and even in pamphlets to help people know what they could cook from their rations.
No television at that point, actually. Don't think, was there?
Well, I think there was.
I don't know.
I think it came out back then. Anyway, that's another fact we'll have to look into. but for sure they were making announcements to help people
on the
along the
radio.
way. That's the important thing.
Yeah.
And some people, if they had a garden and were able to grow some vegetables, then they would have a bit extra.
But if you didn't have a garden, there's a practice that went back to Roman times called an allotment, and we still have them in the UK today.
I don't think allotment is a term that is used in the US. Can somebody say yes or no on the messaging?
Yeah, let us know. Allotment it's a small piece of, like a very small parcel of land.
I think people would use the term vegetable garden in the US.
But it wasn't part of your house.
No.
There could be hundreds of these allotments joined all together. By the way, Karen's saying, love seeing all of the Jeff and Kay Lucas tour friends on here. We'll miss that. And yeah, don't forget, we are still planning to go to Israel, Jordan in November. We're hoping that will happen, and we are certainly hoping that our trip to the Holy Land, London and the Holy Land, will happen next April.
Next spring, yes, 2021.
Yeah, so we've got rock cakes, we've got allotments, and they were called victory gardens, says Suzanne.
During the wartime.
During the wartime.
Interesting, isn't it?
Are you going to eat some of the rock cake? Because I've got to tell you, it's really delicious.
I know, so I find it difficult to talk and eat at the same time. So, yes, back to the allotments. People would have to pay rent for their allotment. They weren't given to people. And even today, you still see allotments in England and the UK, and reading some facts earlier, there's actually a waiting list pretty much in every county.
Keep talking because I'm still eating.
So, how many people in the US or our friends that are joining us today have vegetable gardens or allotments?
Yeah, thumbs up if you've got green thumbs or fingers and you're a gardening person and you enjoy all of that. Let us know if that is the case.
One thing in lockdown that's happened here is a lot of people have been working in their gardens, which is a backyard for the US friends, and they are looking delightful. And even our daughter and family have planted a little vegetable patch in their back garden, and they have had lettuces, courgettes, which is squash in the US.
Is it? It's zucchini, isn't it?
Oh, maybe it's zucchini. It's the green one anyway.
Yeah. All of this talk, says he now, having eaten an... Do you want to jump in and I'll natter for a while so you can enjoy some rock cake? All of this talk about rationing and the Second World War, during this time that we've had a challenge with the COVID crisis, with everything that's been going on, it kind of has made us reflect back on the challenges that previous generations faced. And I've often talked about this man, this handsome man who did not pass on his good looks to his son.
You do look like him, Jack.
Yeah, that's really sweet. That's my dad right there as a young man. And many of you have heard me talk about him before at Timberline. Captured in the Second World War and escaped. And I mentioned, I think, on a previous afternoon tea that I wrote a magazine article about my dad, and a gentleman that read the article the next day went into what we call a charity shop here, and second-hand goods store. Goodwill type thing, isn't it? Yeah. And he saw this book about prisoners of war in the Second World War, and he remembered my article, and so he decided to buy it and send it to me. What he didn't realise is that the gentleman in this book was in the same prison camp as my dad.
That's amazing, isn't it?
What are the chances of that? Now, my dad escaped from the Death March. He was in the camp for at least 4 years, and then when he escaped, thousands and thousands of prisoners were marched in the coldest January in 100 years to try and escape from the advancing Russians. And my dad escaped during that march.
He did, and he didn't like to talk about those years, did he? So we didn't really know too much about what life was like for him then.
He didn't, but here's the strangest thing. This man escaped from the march that same march as my dad in the same circumstances.
That's incredible.
And so I want to read what he experienced because it gives me an insight. He was on the same march as my father, escaped in the same way. He said, a spontaneous action during the march might have killed me if it had gone wrong, but which in any event may well have saved my life. For as the march westward continued, many prisoners lost their lives from cold, hunger and exhaustion. What we did not know at the time was that our column trudging through that terrible winter was one of many involving thousands of prisoners of war as well as concentration camp inmates, a phenomenon that was later to be known collectively as the March of Death. Now remember, this man was in the same camp as my dad, so he was on the same march. Then he says, the column stopped moving for some reason. I turned to my friends and asked them if they were prepared to take a chance. To my great surprise, despite the fact that back in the camp they'd always been plotting something to cause trouble for the Nazis or help others who were trying to escape, neither of them wanted to take a risk now. Jock, one of his friends, looked down at the snow and said, it's your problem. If they see you, you might get shot, but if you get away with it, who can say the Russians won't shoot you anyway? That's probably right, I know, I said, but I could just as well easily die on the march. This way I can at least enjoy a few days of freedom in the warm again. After all those years together, we were only able to say short, only able to say short goodbyes. I looked around to see where the guards were situated along the line of the column. Some ways back, two of them were carrying someone in uniform into the building where a priest had been standing. We were all standing waiting for the guards to return. When they did, they went straight past us to the front where a German officer was shouting and gesticulating. We set off again. The road veered left and then sharply to the right. We were now out of sight of the guards, exactly what happened to my dad, who were all at the front. We were about to pass a big yew tree by the side of the road and running back from the road, a hedge about 6 feet high, I launched myself full length into the snow under the yew tree. Snow fell from the tree and covered me. The rest of the prisoners marched by and no one took any notice of the bundle under the tree. When the sound of the marching column had died away, I crawled along the length of the hedge as far from the road as I could. I ran as fast as my tired legs could manage to the door of a church and slipped inside. I rested my feet for a moment with my back against the door. Once I got my puff back, my breath back, I turned round and saw a priest standing in front of a rough stone font. Smiling, he came towards me and whispered in English, "Welcome, my son." His arm encircled my shoulder and by gentle pressure he moved me from the doorway to a room behind the altar. "I'm glad you came," he said. "Now God will give you some sanctuary." It scarcely seemed possible. I had escaped. Just amazing, actually, very moving to read that description that was very similar to my dad's escape, except that he didn't escape alone. He had a friend who went with him. Well, while we were looking through for this, you found something else.
I found a letter that your dad had written back to home.
27th of October,
40 something.
20, yeah, I think it's 1943 or 44, I think. And it's very fragile. Here it is. He wrote this from the prison camp. And I just want to share a couple of lines from this. This is my dad writing after 4 years in a prisoner of war camp. And he says, "Hi, dear Mum, Dad and all. I'm still in the best of health and smiling through, hoping Mum still has that smile on her face and all at home are okay." Then he talks about how he had celebrated his 4th year in the prison camp by having a bar of chocolate. And then he ends it by saying, "Don't forget, keep that chin up and keep well, and I will be with you soon." So this young man, captured at 19, I think, he's been away from his family. By the way, this was October 1943.
Sorry, but somebody's at the front door.
I'll carry on. He writes in pretty harrowing circumstances and says, "Keep smiling through. I'm doing well. I hope to be with you soon." And you know, as I read this story of escape and as I read this letter, I was very impacted by the resilience of those that went through all that they did. Back at home, they were on rations. They were experiencing the Blitz in London. London was being bombed. The Battle of Britain that took place in 1940 with young airmen fighting in the skies just above where I am right now in the south of England. Rock cakes being recommended by the government because food supplies were low. And then this young fella saying, well, look at that handsome smile. This young fella saying, keep smiling through. So, yeah, it's been a really tough time, hasn't it, for everybody, and we wouldn't minimise that, and so much heartache and pain, especially around the issue of the COVID virus, so many families that have been devastated. We cannot in any way minimise the impact, not only in America, in the UK, but around the world, of this crisis that we've all been living through. But I suppose really our hope and prayer would be that God enables us to keep trusting him, keep focused on him, keep looking out for each other, and to use my dad's words, keep smiling through. We've really enjoyed our Thursday afternoons.
We have.
And
we've talked about all sorts of cakes. Last week, Queen Victoria, Victoria Sponge. It was named after Queen Victoria, yeah. And then rock cakes this week, which were used during the war times because they didn't use so much flour and sugar and eggs,
and then
like normal cakes.
And then Bakewell tarts, and we went to the Folly up on the hills, and we went to the beautiful church, Bury Church, where I got to preach from last weekend.
Talked about footpaths.
We have, but we have really enjoyed you, Timberline family, joining us for these times. We may do some more in the future, but we're going to take a little break, and we'll be letting you know when these Thursdays will be happening, and we're looking forward to being back home in Colorado very soon. So God bless you.
Take care, everybody.
And I think I'm going to eat the rock cake that you, Charlie, can't eat because you're not here. But I'm going to eat it for you.
Keep smiling.
Bye.
Bye-bye.